This September, 193 countries will meet at the UN to adopt new global goals. These 17 goals provide a roadmap that will help the world achieve sustainable development. But what exactly is sustainable development and how does it affect us? Sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. But what does that mean? Everyone understands the need to grow their economies, but not everyone takes into account the negatives that unbalanced economic growth can have on the environment and on people's well-being. It's time to change that by looking at the world in a different way. The Sustainable Development Goals will help us to do that. Sustainable development is about the big picture. It's about improving the lives of everyone, everywhere, and achieving all these things together. But it's also about the details. That means we want economies to grow, companies to thrive, and people to have decent work. We want to create new, innovative technologies, but not by harming the environment. We want everyone to have access to nutritious food regardless of where they live. We want affordable and quality education for everybody, not just a few. We want freedom of speech, but we don't want that to mean violence. But how can we achieve all of this, and where do we even start? Well, the 17 goals will mean member states, alongside civil society stakeholders and major groups, will be working together for the next 15 years, looking at ways we can do business differently so that everyone gains. With these 17 global goals as our guide, we can achieve sustainable development and live in a world where people and planet benefit. But we have to act now. This is the time for global action. To find out how you can get involved and learn more about the goals, go to www.
Hi, Alex here. How can we help people understand how important sustainability is in a good and useful way? Well, one of the things I use is a funnel metaphor to illustrate the fact that there is no better time than now to act on sustainability. So let's get drawing. In the previous video about our ecological footprint, we found out that the Earth's capacity to provide what we need is declining. There are fewer forests and fish today than there were 100 years ago, and this affects the ability of the planet to supply what we call ecosystem services, things that are necessary to support life and on which we rely, like climate regulation, water filtration, soil generation, and so on. At the same time, the rate at which we consume resources and generate waste is going up. But that's not all. This is not only about offer and demand. Growing consumer awareness makes consumers expect new behavior from corporations and governments. Governments are changing laws that are getting stricter. Trust between people is declining. Prices are going up. Abuse of power leads to growing inequality around the world, resulting in more social tension. The world's population is growing, etc., etc. All in all, there is more and more pressure on individuals, communities, and businesses. It looks like all these trends are converging, right? And we don't want to see what happens if or when they meet. It is as if we were going forward in a funnel. The pressure is increasing over time, and we have less and less margin to maneuver. So everybody has their own pet issue. Maybe it's an environmental one, save the forest, save the whales, stop climate change. Or maybe the issue is the social one. Deal with the gap between rich and poor, get children off the street, changing public policy, create more jobs, etc. The fact is, all these issues are related to the key issue of sustainability, our capacity to survive and thrive as a race, and they all impact our ability to live, work, and play on planet Earth. There isn't one business or person I know who doesn't feel these pressures one way or another. That's why the funnel metaphor is helpful in explaining why we should act around sustainability. We need to relieve the pressure. There are hundreds of examples of countries and businesses hitting the walls of the funnel. Some recovered, like Nike after poor labor practices in sweatshops were exposed by Greenpeace. Some did not, like the Easter Island civilization that collapsed after destroying their own environment. Some are still trying to recover, such as Greece or the city of Detroit, who are facing bankruptcy. The funnel metaphor also suggests something else. There is no better time to act than now. Waiting only limits our options even more. So when someone asks, how do I help people understand how important sustainability is in a good and useful way? Consider the funnel metaphor. What we need to do is stop the convergence of all those pressures and find a way through, then ideally begin to open the funnel and to create a resilient, fulfilling, and accessible society that can thrive within nature's limits. As usual, here are the key points. Pressure on society, individuals, businesses, and communities increases over time. There is no better time to act than now. The more we wait, the less margin to maneuver. And the funnel metaphor can be useful to help people understand how important sustainability is and that we need to find our way through and ideally open the funnel. So I will bring more videos about how to make sustainability relevant for your audience. So stay tuned and thank you for watching.
For the first time in the history of the world, human beings are now large enough in numbers and in economic prowess and the way in which we're living to be the primary determinant of the habitability of the planet for ourselves and all of the species. This is unprecedented, and it's because of enormous growth. In the last 2 centuries, we have increased the population of the world from 1 billion to 6.7 billion. We've increased energy consumption by 80 times and economic output 68 times. And most of that has happened during my lifetime. This is extraordinary growth. As a result of that, all the living systems on the Earth are in long-term decline. The fisheries, the forests, the wetlands, the grasslands. And so we're facing, for the first time, a huge challenge. And at the same time, 3.2 billion people earn less than $2.50 a day. They're without sanitation. 1 billion people have no access to clean drinking water. And poverty and the gap between rich and poor in all countries in the world and between countries is increasing. And the question becomes, if this is happening with 25% of the world's population consuming 75 to 80% of the world's resources, how do we find a way to meet the needs, the basic needs, of virtually all the people that are going to be on the planet by the year 2050? Particularly because we expect that there will be about 9 billion people on the planet by the year 2050. As they said in Apollo 13, Houston, we have a problem. And continuing to do business as usual is not going to work. So in a sense, the idea behind sustainability is not about saving the planet. It's actually saving the Earth's capacity to support 9 billion people that will have a decent quality of life, that will be able to participate in economic opportunity, and future generations will be able to do the same. The issue is preserving the Earth's capacity to support a thriving population because, and here is the challenge, here's the intellectual challenge. The Earth provides all the resources which make life possible. And it also assimilates our waste and converts it back into useful substances. We can go about 3 minutes without breathing, about 3 days without water, and about 3 weeks without food. The Earth provides all of the resources that make it possible for us to have shelter, transportation, everything that we do in society. But we assume that we're separate from the Earth. We also assume that the Earth will always be the gift that keeps on giving, ad infinitum, and irrespective of the size of the population and the material needs and desires of humans. So what we need is a different mindset. And as Einstein said, we can't solve today's problems at the level of thinking at which they were created. We need a shift in thinking. And it's about a shift in remaking the human presence in the natural world that will allow everyone to have a decent quality of life. So in a sense, the whole idea behind sustainability was how do we create economic and social development that will assure that everybody now on the Earth will have a decent quality of life, and also future generations will. And that's what it really is about, and that's why it's so critical. The exciting thing from my perspective is that we're beginning to understand that if we find better ways to use our resources more efficiently, if we find our ways to get ourselves off fossil fuels and move to renewable energy, if we find ways to live off nature's income, not its capital. So instead of depleting our fisheries, instead of depleting our forests, instead of depleting our grasslands, we're only using those resources at the rate that they can self-regenerate. This is sustainable. It means you can keep doing it over and over and over again. And that's the essence, is how do we create a sustainable economy? Here's what we know about living sustainably on this Earth. First, using renewable energy, not fossil fuels. Being as energy efficient as possible. It's having a circular production and consumption economy where we eliminate the concept of waste because all waste products are raw materials or nutrients for another product or another activity. This is what nature does. There's no such thing as waste in nature because all waste products become raw materials or nutrients for another species. And the third thing we need to do is to learn how to live off nature's income, not its capital. So we are only using natural resources at the rate that they can self-regenerate. So, and those are the ideas embodied in sustainable forestry, sustainable agriculture, and sustainable fisheries. Those are the basic principles of how to live sustainably. And how we can convert that into the right economic incentives and the right sort of economic strategy for society, that's what will allow us to meet the needs of the most people for the longest time.
Hi guys! Do you have time for a few quick questions? I see you're having a lot of fun, but do you ever stop and think if what you do is sustainable? And do you know what sustainable development means? Sustainable development is to make the world a better place for everyone now without destroying the possibilities for the next generations. If you wonder if something is sustainable, you can ask yourself, can we do this over and over again forever? Sustainable development means that we need to keep three things in mind at once: social progress, economic development, and climate and environment. First of all, we have to take care of our planet. We have many natural ecosystems that must be in balance in order for us to live here. The climate system is one of them. This system ensures that the temperature is correct and that the atmosphere emits exactly the right amount of solar energy. When we emit harmful greenhouse gases, such as CO2, we clog the atmosphere. This changes the temperatures on Earth, which again affects our development. How we produce and use energy is incredibly important. Oil and coal are examples of energy we may run out of. Water, wind, and sun, however, will always be here. Using the lasting sources of energy that renew themselves is good for the planet and can provide jobs for years to come. Economics. Almost everything we develop, buy, and trade starts with nature. The smarter we use our natural resources and the better systems we create for a fair distribution, the more sustainable we are. One way to contribute to a more uneven distribution is to be more aware of what we buy and how it is produced. A football is a good example. It travels far before it reaches the football players. First, the materials are made. Then, they print the logo somewhere else before a third country sews it all together. One single football sees the whole world before it reaches its goal. This journey ties us together. If we are to win the battle for a sustainable future, we have to play with fair rules that applies to everyone. Social progress. We humans are part of nature, but we're also important resources for the world. Just like water, the forest, and the sun, we have minds that can create the strangest and most creative things. But for us to be the best versions of ourselves, there are certain things that must be in order, like having equal opportunities to education, safety, food, and medicine. This provides greater opportunities for us as human beings, but also for the planet. We just have to think in new ways. These three must work together. That is sustainable development. And there is actually a plan for this. All the countries of the United Nations have agreed on a joint plan for sustainable development. But for the plan to work, we need to cooperate, and we need you to be on board. Are you with us?